All right, hello again. So we are in part 2 of a series we're calling Table Matters, simply because there was this last meal that Jesus had with his followers, his disciples, those were his students, and at this meal, he said and did some things that were really unexpected and like totally out of the norm, and it would be no stretch of the imagination for us to think that his disciples there at that meal were like, this guy either lacks table manners or he's operating from a completely different set than we're used to. So we're going to talk about that in a moment, but I want to begin by performing a little confession. Somebody's already laughing, thank you. So I'm not naturally inclined towards generosity. Like what I mean by that is, to be generous and fully giving and to just give away anything that's mine, whether it be stuff, time, or whatever, that is not easy or natural for me. I'm not sure if that's just because of I was born that way, or because I grew up the second of 4 brothers, and anything that was mine was probably not mine originally, or it was just like having your own stuff was a big premium, or if somebody had something in the family that we really wanted, we would barter for it. I remember thinking back, if one of my brothers got candy, it'd be like, hey, can I have some? And it'd be like, no. And then I'd be like, well, how about I give you this and you give me some of your candy? Or if we're going to take a long trip upstate, because we have family in upstate New York, it'd be like, all right, well, I don't want that seat. I want this seat. But I'll let you sit in the good seat if you let me play your video games as part of the ride up. Does that sound familiar? Have you ever seen kids do this? It's like, I don't know what, it's like just being kind for some. I'll admit, for some kids, they're just so nice, and they're just naturally, but other kids are like, no way am I ever giving up anything for free. I want something in return. And this feeling has existed within me. Even when people are super nice here at the church and they do awesome things, I'm always like, why? Even just in the announcement, if you go downstairs and you fill out this form, you're gonna get a free gift. How free is it? Are you gonna start tracking my attendance? What's going on there? And that feeling, I have lived with, and it still haunts me, and I still think about it. Anytime I'm interacting with people, I'm like, okay, what's on the other side of this giving, right? What do you want in exchange? If you're going to give me something, what are you asking for from me? And I keep going back to this idea of what's in it for you, really? What's your angle? What do you get from this interaction? And here's where it turns and just gets said. A lot of times, this feeling is how I think about God. Especially when I was younger. I would think about God okay, he just wants something from me. It seems like all of the teaching that comes out of a church about man, God just wants you to be, grateful and generous, and he's offering you so much. There's grace, there's mercy, forgiveness, a new name, a fresh start, a place in heaven. All of the stuff sounds awesome. It's yeah, but what's the catch? What does he want from me in exchange? And then you come to find out, and whether this was intentional or not, sometimes churches would talk about, well, you should do these things because Jesus did this for you. I'm like, there it is. There's the obligation. There's now the thing that I have to now pay back through my behavior, through my obedience. I have to follow Jesus' commandments. I have to be this is where it gets tough for me. It's not only do I have to go do good things towards others because of what Jesus has done for me, but I also have to have a really good attitude about it too. Where it's oh, you can't just, forgive. You have to be forgiving on the inside. And I'm like, really? Where does this go? Why is there so much all right, Jesus scratched my back. No, I have to scratch his. God, what's in it for you, man? What does this go to? It just seems like you want me to behave and feel and think a certain way. To what end? Where does it lead? And the silly conclusion, or the unfortunate conclusion, is that it sometimes feels like God he's just wants us to stroke his ego, make him look good. Or he's just flexing his mind, haha, I made these people do what I wanted. Congratulations to me. And I'm that cannot be it. And I don't know if you've ever felt this way before. You've thought about man, there's just so many things I have to do if I want to be in with God. Or there's so many things I have to do just to keep him happy. I know I've heard about this grace and this mercy stuff, but it still feels like there's a long list of things that I'm required to do, I'm obligated to do to keep him happy. It feels like there's this mountain of debt that has occurred because of my sin, which is just a fancy word for saying like I've fallen short, I've missed the mark. Not just fallen short of God's standards for me, but fallen short from my own, of what I want to do with my life, how I want to actually interact and treat people. And I've messed that up. And there's this list of sins, and I've heard that he's cleared all these things away. But it feels more like they're not gone. He just took them. And now I owe him instead. So is that really what's going on here? Is the good news gone? Like, is it not really good news? Is the gospel of Jesus, which literally means good news, is it actually good, or is it just like, okay, he's just a cosmic debt collector, and Jesus was the bank manager who helped make the transaction possible? That cannot be what's going on here. So what we're going to do, if you've ever felt this way, is we're going to spend some time looking at this last meal that Jesus has with his followers. It's his last chance to instruct them and to show them and to teach them. And at this meal, he does and says things that I think will just take all of that line of thinking and just throws it out. Like, that can't exist with what we're about to see him say and do. So that's where we're going to head. We're going to jump into this story, and just a quick, some context, like we are at the end of Jesus' story. Like, we're going to be looking at the Gospel of Matthew. That's one of the accounts of Jesus' life and ministry. That book, I think, is 28 chapters long, if I'm not mistaken. We're in chapter 26. So we're like close to the end, and Jesus knows it's the end. And he's finally getting a chance to sit down one last time with his followers. And that's where we're going to pick it up. This is what it says. It says, while they were eating, that's Jesus and his 12 disciples. This is a customary Jewish meal that they're sitting down at. It says, Jesus took bread, and when he had given thanks, when he had said a particular prayer at this meal, he broke it and he gave it to his disciples, like you would do at a meal like this. And then he says something interesting. He says, take and eat. This is my body. And immediately they were like, huh? What? Didn't know we were doing that today. Luke adds a little more context or a little more information. He says that Jesus said, this is my body given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. And then it continues and says, then he took the cup, a cup, and when he had given thanks, another prayer, he gave it to them, his disciples, saying, drink from it, all of you. And it continues and says, this is my blood of the covenant. I'm sorry, what are we drinking? I didn't know we were going there. This is wild. And then he says, this blood is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. Now this language, these words, you may have heard of these things before. If you've spent any time in church, you might know this as communion. Or perhaps in a different faith tradition, you heard of it called like the Lord's Supper or the Eucharist. That's where this comes from. That's where where communion and the passing of bread, or people lining up to receive from a priest or a minister, or passing of plates that have pieces of bread or whatever it might be, that's where all of this comes from. And it's meant to be a Christian-like practice, something Christians would do on purpose because Jesus said to do it in remembrance of him. But when I was younger, when I was like a couple years within following Jesus, as a Christian, as like a teenager, communion was not like some beautiful ceremony kind of thing where I was like, oh, this is so like beautiful and meaningful. It was terrifying for me because I had already suspected that God wanted more from me, that he was there to collect on the debt. And when I got to communion, especially at the church I grew up going to, where it was told like, well, if you don't even do communion right, that's a problem. I was like, oh my gosh, there's already so many to-dos. Now I have to worry about this as well. And I would sit while they would pass the plates and there would be little pieces of bread and a cup of grape juice in there. I would just start worrying about all the sins I had forgotten to ask God to forgive. I would think about how I had, hit my brothers or something. Or I would think about how I lied to my parents, or how I didn't do my assignment, or how I thought about this person. Whatever it might have been, I would just sit there and think like, okay, I have to make sure I ask for forgiveness for all of these things. I don't want to be doing this incorrectly. I don't want to mess communion up and have God mad at me or be upset with me or feel like he's just like piling on the debt and it's getting ever higher. And I sat there afraid rather than what I think Jesus was actually going for, because I was still stuck in this mode of like, I gotta do because he did for me. Like, I have to earn it back. I have to pay him back. It's a give and take situation. There's no free gift here. I was so focused on these two words in this passage where it says, this is my body given for you. I was focused on these things. Do this. Another thing to follow, another obligation, Another reason I feel like there's a weight that I cannot lift on my own. It became not a beautiful ceremony for me. It became a reminder of the debt I owed. It became another, like, see, don't forget, you got to pay him back. You got to live correctly. You got to act and think and speak correctly. Otherwise, he's going to be ticked at you. And who knows, maybe the heaven thing, not for you, I guess. And unfortunately, I missed the thing that Jesus was actually after. And I think the thing that sometimes we get just distracted and we just miss what he was trying to communicate to his followers. Look at this. Let's go back to that. It says, "This is my body given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." I was so focused on this me and not him. And he was saying this to his followers very much on purpose. That the idea behind taking communion or sharing in the Lord's Supper or receiving the Eucharist is the purpose of remembering, to simply remember. And I had lost sight of that because I didn't pay attention to what he had just done with his disciples. If you recall, if you weren't here last week, I'll sum it up real quick. Before this meal commences and it takes place, Jesus gets on the ground to wash his disciples' feet, which was completely upside down and backwards and wrong on so many levels. Like the one in charge, they don't get on the ground and wash their students' feet. The teacher, they're not to touch their students' feet. That if anyone should do that, it should be the students washing the teacher's feet. But some of his followers also saw him as Lord, which means master. The one with authority doesn't get on the ground to wash their feet. And that was kind of the point. He wanted them to exist in this weird balance of ooh, I don't know if he should be serving us, but also feeling grateful and gratitude for the fact that he actually took care of something that needed to be taken care of. They're supposed to live in or with some balance or in harmony of both things. I'm not worthy of you stooping down to wash my feet, but I'm also thankful. And he's like, remember that. Remember that feeling, because you're going to drift. You're going to go, through life and things are going to push you further and further away from remembering this idea that I didn't come to serve, that I came to be a servant, to give my life as a ransom for many, for you. And Tom, I was so focused on my sin and all the things I have done wrong to God, to people, to everyone, that I missed the remembering that Jesus was after. And maybe the context of this meal will help. You see, this was a Jewish practice. They would meet annually to eat this meal together. It was a very specific time during the year. And actually, in our year, it just ended yesterday, I believe. It was Passover. Now, the holiday, the remembering Passover, it pointed back to 1,200 years before. So for us, it's over 3,000 years ago. There was the nation of Israel, and they were enslaved in Egypt. That's a very, very long story that I cannot get into, but it's in Exodus, the book of Exodus in the Old Testament part of the Bible. And at the end of the day, what that story was about was these Israelites, supposedly God's people, were stuck in Israel for hundreds of years. And for generations, they just wanted help. They wanted rescue. They wanted deliverance. And then it shows up. And then the people of Israel commemorated their rescue by putting a meal together meant to remind the people of who they are, of their heritage, of their history, of what God had done for them. That God was the rescuer and brought them out of slavery from the grip of Pharaoh. And Jesus takes the elements of this Passover meal and he connects the dots between the things they are doing in this meal to be good Jewish people, good Jewish men, and he raises the stakes, sort of. He elevates this meal to a new height. There was things in this meal like the reciting of the story of Exodus and prayers that Jesus prayed, and he did. But then there was the breaking of bread, which was a very particular kind of bread. We would call it matzah. It had no yeast, no leavening, because the people back 1,200 years before Jesus, they couldn't wait around for the bread to poof up so they could bake it. So they were Bake your bread as is. We got to get out of Egypt. So they would have this cracker-like bread. And so Jesus takes that bread, which they would use to symbolize their escape and their rescue out of Egypt. And he's like, this bread is life. It is food. It is nourishment. It is good for you. I am that bread. I am going to be broken for you. And I want you to participate in what I'm doing. So you need to eat this bread. You need to consume my broken body because it will give you life. And as part of this meal, they would also drink 4 different distinct cups of wine. And at one of them, we're not exactly which one of the 4, probably the 3rd, but Jesus goes, rather than reciting the normal thing that they would associate with that cup of wine, he says, this cup is different. Just like in the actual Passover, a lamb had to be slain, killed, and its blood used to protect the people of Israel, my blood is going to be spilled on a cross to rescue not just Israel from the grip of Pharaoh, but to rescue all people in the world from the grip of their sin and the death that it creates within them. So we don't refer to this practice as Passover, even though it looks a lot like it. We've changed the name. We call it the Lord's Supper, or communion, or Eucharist. Because it was meant to be about remembering what Jesus had done. I mean, look at all the things that he says here. He says, this is my body given for you. Like, he's talking to his disciples. He's like, you're not going to get this now, so you're going to need to remember these things. Like, I'm going to break. I'm going to be beaten and crucified and humiliated, put up on a cross. It's for you. Next slide, please. And he says, this is my blood of the covenant, which just means agreement. This is a new way for people to see themselves in light of God's activity. In the past, the Israelites, they had to perform. They had to obey the rules so that God would continue smiling on them. At least that's what it felt like. And Jesus is like, there's a new way it's going to be. Not because of anything you could do. You have no ability in this market. You have no clout. You have no currency that you can purchase what I'm purchasing for you. It's my blood that says you're in. God smiles on you because of what I have done, which is poured out for many, like loads and loads of people, the world, for the purpose of forgiving their sins. So no longer do you have to feel the weight of all that you have done wrong. No longer do you need to carry this like it's a burden to carry, because Jesus has taken it and he's paid for it. And all of this whole communion, this whole Eucharist, this whole Lord's Supper, this whole entire practice is not meant to be a reminder of the debt that I owe or the debt that you owe God, but rather it's meant to be the reminder of the debt that he paid. That you're not on the hook anymore for these things. That you don't have to walk through life thinking, oh, I know I'm supposed to do this. I feel like I have to go to church and do these things and pray at this time and read this and forgive. Like, it's not a have to. It's not an obligation. It's meant to be a reminder of the debt that he paid. We do the things because we remember. Because in the remembering, you remember, or it forms rather, who you are. The Israelite people, every year, were supposed to take some time and sit and eat this very peculiar meal with all of the steps, with all the readings, with all the singing and the prayers, so that they would never forget that it was Yahweh, God, that rescued them from Egypt. And Jesus is like, yeah, remember this meal? Like, you guys were all in it right now. He's like, it's going to reach a new height. My people will eat a meal just like this, but they're not going to remember just the rescue from Israel. They're going to remember their rescue from sin. And it's not just for one people group. It's not just for those that call themselves Jewish people, like the Jews, the Israelites. This is for all men and all women, all people of every land in the world. And for that, because of that rather, the answer to the question that I've had about, God, what are you up to? What is all this for? Like, what are you trying to get at? What's in it for you? The answer isn't God, it's us. Where in the past I would have said, yeah, it's about him. He just wants to look good. No. Like, this is about us. It's about you and me. That communion is the reminder about what he has done. because when we sit on it, when we take the time to think about it, it changes us. When we dwell on our own stuff, we just feel the weight, we feel the guilt, we feel the shame, we feel like, how could I ever correct myself? It's like when we sit, we think about the grace and the mercy and the forgiveness and the welcoming in spite of the mistakes we've made, as well as the ones we're going to continue to make. It changes us. And here's how I know that's true, okay? So I had mentioned, I'm not naturally inclined towards generosity. Years ago, I had a 1993 Nissan Maxima, maroon. Yeah, you know. It was an awesome car. I loved it. But when it came time to get a different car, it was a 2001 MR2 Spider convertible. It was awesome. Loved that car. I used to be cool. Once that car left my life, I was no longer cool. When I got rid of the Maxima, I gave it away. Free and clear. Why? Not because of Jesus, which seems crazy. I'll tell you why. Because that car was given to me. Free. Without charge. I will never forget, it was actually at a meal. It wasn't a Passover meal. But I was sitting across, my wife was next to me. I don't recall if we were married at this point, but she was sitting next to me, and across from me was my friend Charlie. And we were eating rigatoni alla vodka, in case you were wondering. And he's like, hey, I'm getting a new car. I'm getting this diesel jet. I'm buying it from Connecticut. I'm like, oh, that's amazing. He loves high, MPGs or whatever. And I'm like, what are you going to do with the Maxima? He's like, do you want it? I'm like, yeah, tell me how much you want for it. He literally reaches into his pocket, pulls out the keys, and goes, here. When you take the train home from the city, it's at Ronkonkoma. Take it home. Eventually surrender the plates, and it's yours. And I was like, huh? Like, what? You're just giving me your, like, he didn't want anything for it. So, when it came time for me to get rid of the Maxima, it would have been weird for me to sell it. It would have been inappropriate. You'd be like, you're taking advantage of this guy's generosity. But like, no. Like that, but I didn't. Because I sat and thought about Charlie's generosity towards me, and it changed me. Where normally I would want money. Surprise. But I gave it away because I knew that I had been given to. And that's what the point, that's the whole point of communion. That's the whole point of the Eucharist. That's the point of the Lord's Supper. It's like, remember how much has been given to you, and then pass that on when you live your life. Not, you better behave, and you better think right too while you're doing it. You better feel the right things when you're behaving the right ways. It's like, no. Like, we get to participate in God's work because he has given so much to us. And I talked about this a little bit last week. Right, Jesus washes his disciples' feet, and then he says, I've set an example for you. So, the conclusion was, we do as he has done for us. And for a lot of us, we need to get to this part. We need to do. We've done a lot of knowing, and some of us just need to do. However, you don't out of your strength. You don't out of your ability. You don't out of, because you're so great. We have to sit here and remember. And that's what communion, the Eucharist, and the Lord's Supper is meant to be. A time to think about what he has done for us. It is the reminder. It is the reminder of the debt that he paid. And we're going to do that this morning. We're going to spend some time, and we're going to take the Lord's Supper together. But before I get there, I want to say one other thing. And this was kind of fascinating for me. I grew up going to church every Sunday. It was part of my family's regular routine. If it was Sunday, we're going to church. Do you know that I have no idea what the actual definition of the word communion is up until this week? Does anybody know? It's not that, it's actually pretty easy once you think about it a little bit, but it comes from the Latin word communio, which means sharing, fellowship. And then this one blows my mind even more. The word Eucharist, which we do not use outside of church things for the most part, right? It means giving thanks. Communion, the Eucharist, the Lord's Supper is meant to be a fellowship, a hanging out together, giving thanks together. And sometimes we've turned it into like just a ritual that we have to do. When it's meant to be like, no, let's just sit for a moment and literally give thanks. And be, as best we can, be grateful. Not dwell on how much we have to perform or how much we failed. But just be like, hey, God, thanks. That's what this is meant to be. So we're going to do that together. So in this aisle, there are little trays on the rack of your seat. If you take one and then pass it that way, that'd be great. And then over here on this aisle, yep, it's on this side. So you guys should get yours as it comes down this way. So it's like what's happening right now is when I would start to be like, oh man, I got to make sure I'm right with God, and be like the dread would kick in. I'd start praying hard. I'd be like, all right, Jesus, there's probably sins I forgot. Can you forgive those too? Which those aren't bad prayers, by the way. It was just that the feeling behind it wasn't gratitude. It was fear. It was attached to performance. It was attached to trying to pay him back. Instead of living in the gratitude, living in thankfulness, living in, wow, I cannot believe I don't deserve him serving me in this manner, and also feeling grateful all at the same time, like Jesus would want his disciples to feel. So I hope that the guilt and the shame, all that stuff, is replaced with gratitude for Jesus. So, carrying on a tradition, a practice, a ritual that has been going on for 2,000 years, we will take the Lord's Supper, communion, the Eucharist together. On the night that Jesus would be betrayed, he sat with his disciples, who he considered friends. And he took the bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke and said, "This is my body, which is broken for you. I give up my life so that you can have true, everlasting life. So eat this in remembrance of me." Let's eat together. And in the same way, he took the cup, saying that this cup is the cup of the new covenant that's in my blood. The newly restored relationship and agreement between all people and God, our Heavenly Father, purchased by the spilling of my blood on the cross. Do this in remembrance of me. Let's drink together. What's amazing is that we've participated in something that's been going on for 2,000 years, where Christians, Jesus followers, people who have put their faith in him, have been gathering together and trying to find ways, or utilizing the way, to remind themselves of what he has done for all of us, and what we want all people to understand and to embrace, that he has paid it all, that it's all done because of him. Now, they didn't have, handy little contraptions like this. They broke matzah, or bread, and handed them out. And they drank wine out of cups that were normal sized, instead of grape juice out of little plastic pieces. But it's a tradition that's been going on because we need to be reminded. We need to remember that it's not about what we can do, but what he has already done for us. That we are welcomed in to a smiling Heavenly Father, not a judging cosmic debt collector who can't wait for us to drop the ball so he can punish us, but rather one who longs to bring everyone into the fold, to bring everyone into the family. And that's what this is meant to be. But we're also handing out palms. Now, I didn't do this because I'm not that skilled, but there are people who can do this, and there are videos online. If you'd like to have another reminder that can go with you through the week, right? Grab one of these palms on the way out, You don't have to fold it into a cross, but you can keep it, I don't know, next to your car seat when you drive, right? Like as a reminder to not hurt people while you're driving. But also just to be like, as I'm getting to work or as I'm driving home, like help me to be mindful of all that Jesus has done for me. Let me live in a place of gratitude. Another great place to keep this would be next to a mirror that you look at when you get ready. So that not only do you see your reflection, that you can dwell on what Jesus has done for you. And you can look at yourself knowing that God loves the person you see in the mirror. And hopefully, because of that, it'll change us. Just like Passover was meant to do for the Israelites. It was supposed to remind them of who they are. When they had drifted, they'd get back to this ceremony. Remember, God delivered us out of Egypt. And for us, communion and palms and things like this, it's meant to help us dwell on the fact that Jesus rescues us from our sin and all the calamity we create through our own decisions, even when we're trying our best or honestly just doing our worst. And I hope that it affects you and it changes you so that you can be the people he has called you to be. When you step out and you serve this world, you bring heaven that's living inside of you with you to the world, because this world desperately needs it.